I am nervous. And I think the part that would pour in from me would probably be like a 5-gallon bucket, and Michael would be a pint. That's what you said. I'm just saying. I do want to say, first of all, Charity Hill. It's going to be a Sunday night service here in a minute, so I'll get the quick ride. Charity Hill has been a blessing to me my whole life. And it feels like home. And I know, y'all know what a great pastor you have and a great church you have here. It's hard to find. So, they also said, whenever Michael did this, Michael got emotional a couple of times, and somebody, well, several people said after the meeting, well, we expected that from you, but not from Michael. I mean, we know you're going to cry a lot. And I thought, I went home and I told Lisa, I said, I'm not. I'm going to walk up there and I'm going to be mad, and I'm not going to cry the whole time. I'm just going to yell this out and go home. But anybody who knows me knows that ain't true. Because, like I said, Charity Hill is home to me, and there's been a lot of tears I've cried, and even this morning, just hearing the choir. And feeling that spirit, it's a blessing. So, thank y'all. All right. Today we're going to be talking about Daddy, son to be. You can't look at it all the time. I should put him up here behind me, because the only bigger crybaby in this church than me is Daddy. So I'll be talking to y'all the rest of the morning. But we'll start here and we'll go through this. And I went over this several times with Lisa. And, I cried about things that aren't even emotional during this. It was just stuff that hit me, and thinking about, things about the church and things we went through in my life. And it's going to be tough. So y'all praying. I'm nervous, but we'll get through it. I know we will. So Charlie Wayne Lyles was born on February 17th, 1948, to Charlie and Virgie Lyles. He grew up just down the road here. Most of you have been out there that way. He started in State Road, I believe, and then moved up to Fountain Park, just about a mile from here. He was surrounded by family growing up with both of his grandparents living on the same road. He was surrounded with his Aunt Flory, his Aunt Ethel, his Uncle Larry, and he was a typical country boy growing up. He was a Boy Scout who loved hunting and fishing with his grandpa and his Uncle Ed. And now when you hear all that, you probably get a picture of kind of like Opie Taylor. When you see that picture right there, you probably really get a picture of Opie Taylor. Because he was definitely the picture of Opie, just with brown hair there. And but there is some people here in the church that may not think of it that way. And his older sister, Joan, is one of those people that probably don't remember that. Most of her stories probably don't start with, well, Wayne was a Boy Scout. I'll tell you that. And a couple of stories that we've heard when I was growing up that I remember Joan telling quite a few times about Daddy was one time Joan had came home with one of her baby dolls. She picks it up and she looked at the baby doll, and the fingertips were cut off of each one of her baby doll's hands. And so when she went to ask it around, of course she didn't have to go far to find out what had happened. And Daddy just told her I was just cutting its fingernails. He clipped the ends off of every one of her fingernails off that baby doll. She still got that baby doll. I remember growing up, you'd see that little baby doll, and I thought, that's a scary little thing. Hung on to it anyway. And one other time, and I guess that's a little weird, I'm telling about Daddy playing with baby dolls and some of the stuff he did. Sorry, that's not what I'm trying to get across here today. But I will say, one other time that Daddy, and again, you can can see this picture here, and picture this child doing it instead of this Wayne Lyles. But Daddy smeared, I think it was paint or something on his face like war paint, and pretended to be, he was playing cowboys and Indians. And you know those dolls that stand pretty tall? He took one of those dolls and tied it to a stick out in the trash pile, and he burned it at the stake. These are a lot of the stories that Joan had told us growing up. I think it influenced me and Michael on a lot of some of the crazy stuff we did. Well, Daddy did it, so we know it was.
That was the last time I played with baby dolls.
No, and you know, it makes me think of a time. There was a time when we were out at Grandma Virgie's, and Irvin Dotson was out there, and anybody who knows Irvin, you know, he's full of mud. And he was sitting there and he was telling Grandma that I was a mean youngin'. And we're trying to get Grandma started on that. And I'll never forget her, just the sweetest little face and little voice she looked. He's a lot like his daddy. He's not mean, he's just a mischievous child. And I remember thinking, I'm just mischievous, I'm not mean. But when Joan may not agree with that, she might go with mean on that. But Daddy was a little mischievous as a child. But Daddy says all the time that Joan was always good to him and always looked after him when they were growing up. And Daddy, like I said, Daddy was a good kid. He was kind of a good student. He does brag about his student days. He talks about he was the smartest student in his 7th grade class. The second time he was in 7th grade. And the only reason I tell that is because that's one of his favorite jokes. So I wouldn't have. And as he got to his teenage years, Daddy, like most boys, he got interested in cars and football and girls. Well, mostly a girl, and we'll get to her here in a minute. But with that being said, you know, Daddy, he sold his first horse, and I was asking, you know, what his horse's name was, and it was Maud. His first old horse was Maud, and he sold for $100 to buy his first car. It was a green 53 Chevrolet. And we asked him was it a good-looking car, and he said, no, it was ugly. I guess for $100, there's not much you can expect on that. And he said he sold his first horse to get that car, and at that time, too, as a teenager, he was making a name for himself playing football. He played, I think, offensive, defensive tackle, and he was also a kicker for Surrey Central. And Daddy's not really, probably when you look at him, you wouldn't think he's a kicker. That's not really he's more of a Janikowski, I guess, if y'all know football. Y'all know what I'm talking about there. That's a big kicker, by the way, for people who watch football. And, but Daddy actually was nicknamed in a newspaper article one time as Golden Toes Lyles for all the extra points that he kicked. Again, that's two things. You played with dolls and you were nicknamed Golden Toes. This is not going the way that I do. So, anyway, we'll move right on. We'll get to the part where we're but Daddy, he took that old Golden Toes there. He took that 53 Chevy and he traded it with his Uncle Ray at a car lot. He traded that car and $550 and got what became really a part of our family is the 56 Chevy that Daddy used to drive. For a lot of you that knew Daddy growing up, you probably saw it or heard it or got passed by it or saw it drive by at pretty high speeds, just a turquoise flash from what I hear. Well, he quit telling those stories after I got my license and stuff. But most of the stories that Mom and Daddy told us growing up, they started and were based around, it started with that 56. And the story of their actual story began because of that 56. 56 had broke down, and Daddy, Mom was going to church at Ronda Tabernacle, and they had singing that night she gave me the date on that, I remember here. But they had a singing that night, and Grandma Virgie had wanted Daddy to meet Mama, and I guess needed a good influence in his life, and so she wanted her to meet Mama, and had been trying, but the only place she could ever find Mama was at church, and it was hard to get Daddy into church. So what she had done was they took advantage of the opportunity that his car was burnt down, and they told him that if he would go with them to the singing that night, that they would take him to Speedy Chef. And anybody who knows, that's pretty much a deal. That's a deal for anybody that'll go to Speedy Chef about anything. And so after church, he met Mama that night, and then shortly after that, he asked her to actually go on a date. And the first date that Daddy asked her to go for. He was still playing football. And he asked her to go on a date on Friday night and come watch him play football at Missouri Central. And now, you got to put this into perspective. Mama lived in Rhonda, and Daddy lived in Mountain Park, and Missouri Central's in Dobson, and Mama was saying, you know, at that time, you didn't travel to too many other cities, and she had no idea where Dobson was, and no idea how to get there, and Daddy come and picked her up that night and took her, but he did tell her that his cousin Becky would sit with her if she'd come to that game that night without her knowing anybody, so she went. During that game, their first date, Daddy got on the bottom of a pile and got his knee crushed, and they carried him off the field that night while she's sitting with Becky in that crowd of people that she has no idea, and of course she has no idea where Dobson is or how she's going to get home. And said she was thinking the whole time, what in the world, how am I going to get home now? This is, of course, before cell phones, and you call and tell your buddy to come pick you up. And so she said she sat there during the whole game just wondering what she was going to do and how she was going to make it home. After the game, she saw Daddy hobbling across the field, and he made it over to the bleacher and said, this is what I'm talking about. I get emotional over the park thing. You wouldn't think I'd get emotional over it, but I do. It's good football stories. I always love it. Daddy had hobbled over to her, and he told her that he would take her home, and they had told him that night he needed to go to the hospital. They were going to take him on to the hospital there from the field, and he told him he couldn't. He had brought a date from Rhonda, and he had to drive her home, and after he drove her home, he'd drive himself to the hospital. So Mama said during the whole time she realized his knee was pretty bad off. It was swollen, and he was in a lot of pain, and she said he was trying to be all tough, and again, that you can only picture that Elvis look, and he was all slick back and trying to suffer through it. And she said last night, she said, I just wish he'd let me go to the hospital, because that would have been such a better story, and we could have fell in love even quicker. But so he drove her home that night, and drove her back to Rhonda, and when he got to the house, this is the part where I think Mom and Daddy kind of differs. Mama doesn't like what Daddy says about what happened on that night, but what his phrase is, that Mama was all over him like cheap perfume. I don't know what that means. And I'm a little disappointed in him for saying it. But, now, Mama's view of the story was a whole lot more appropriate for my parents, they say. And Mama says that they got in the car. They had their first kiss that night when they got back to the house, and said, like you heard what Daddy said, and Mama said what happened was he come across that seat so fast that their teeth clinked and hit together. It's smooth there, Elvis. And Mama said she was embarrassed to death, and all she could think about was that was all she could think about when she got out of the car, was how embarrassed she was. So that's definitely two different stories.
Yes.
From there, their love story begins, and Mom always says she was a good girl and he was a bad boy, but she fell head over heels for him. Don't get me wrong, there were some rocky times, and those are some of the best stories they've got to tell. Daddy loved to race cars and didn't mind getting in a fight anytime someone would want to fight him. He was all up for it. And Mom said that she had got saved just before her and Daddy started dating. And she said that it was a good thing, because she said she learned how to pray really quick by getting in the car with Daddy, and when somebody would want to race him, she'd start praying, and she'd talk him out of it most of the time. But the other thing that they talk about was, you know, they did break up a couple of times, as most young teenagers do, and they took some time apart, and Mama would test the waters and see if there was any other boys out there in Rhonda that would be interested in her. And Daddy quickly made that clear that was not an option, because what he would do is go and find every boy that she went on a date with, and he'd as he says, I'd whip them. And Mama made the statement several times throughout our life that I had to marry your daddy because he beat up everybody else I tried to date. So, you're getting the picture here. I know when y'all see Wayne Lyles, you think of that hand in the air, but he ain't always been this way Lyles. Thank God he is now, but he ain't always been this way Lyles. So like I said there, he beat up just about everybody she dated. After a couple years of that, she decided she was going to marry. They got married on September 14, 1968. 3 years later, they had their first son, Michael Lyles, on August 29, 1971. Mom and Daddy had always hoped to have the perfect baby boy, but realized Michael was not that. They wanted to make sure they had one, and so they had another son on October 16, 1976, and they realized they had achieved their goal. So, thank you for not giving up on your goal for perfection. That was for the little sign last time. I didn't bring any props, but growing up in our house was different. You know, we grew up. Daddy was strict, and you know we knew Daddy was the one who ran our house a lot of times. And I say a lot of times, but I mean he did. It was clear. And we were joking about it. I was telling Lisa about it. We were talking, and me and Michael get into a little bit of disputes, and we'd try to talk things out a lot of times. Me and Michael would when we were younger, and we'd get into a lot of fights. And you'd hear Daddy. He always worked. Most of the time, he'd work all day, 12-hour shifts, and he'd come home. He's exhausted. And he'd get in that recliner, and when he got in that recliner and ate supper, and he was kind of, let me rest, and boy, we'd start fighting. Well, Mama, she's a tattletale, and she'd let it go until she'd finally tell on us, and she would remind, are you just going to let them keep fighting? And boy, you'd hear that recliner, and that thing would slam down like a shotgun. And when you heard that recliner, we'd stop fighting immediately and both go to our rooms or to our neutral corner. And we knew when you heard that recliner shut down. I told Lisa, I said, you know, I hate that sometimes because when I get mad with the girls and enough's enough, we have an electric recliner. And it's just not as effective when you're like, you know what, that's enough. I'm coming to get you. And when this thing gets down, ooh, here we're going to roll. It's not as effective. So I'd say for anybody who's raising kids, get you a regular lazy boy recliner where that thing slams down. Because that noise will put the fear of God in it. So, and I wasn't going to tell that, but I thought I'd throw that in there. But I will say this, growing up in our house was different. And don't get me wrong, Daddy was good. He's always good to us.
That's right.